December 26, 1944, Morotai Island, Dutch East Indies. The humid jungle air pressed against Private Teruo Nakamura's sweat-soaked uniform like a suffocating blanket. At 22, the Taiwanese-born soldier crouched behind a massive banyan tree, his Type 38 rifle clutched in trembling hands as Allied B-25 Mitchell bombers thundered overhead at 8,000 feet. The sound of their twin Wright R-2600 engines reverberated through the dense canopy, drowning out the constant buzz of malaria-carrying mosquitoes that had already claimed 847 Japanese soldiers on this god-forsaken island. Lieutenant Colonel Kiyoshi Yamamoto adjusted his field glasses, watching American landing craft approach the coral beaches 2.3 kilometers away. His weathered face, marked by 3 years of jungle warfare, showed no emotion as he counted 47 Higgins boats carrying approximately 1,400 enemy troops. The mathematics were brutal. His remaining garrison of 312 men faced an invasion force of 40,000 Americans, supported by 156 artillery pieces and unlimited naval gunfire. "Nakamura-san," Yamamoto whispered, his voice barely audible above the distant rumble of naval bombardment. "Take your squad to grid reference 247891. Establish observation post. Report enemy movements every 2 hours." The lieutenant colonel handed him a waterproof map case containing coordinates that would determine the young soldier's fate for the next 3 decades. Nakamura bowed deeply, accepting orders that would transform him from a forgotten private into one of history's most remarkable survivors. He didn't know that Emperor Hirohito would surrender Japan in 8 months, or that he would spend 10,957 days believing the war was still raging while the world moved on without him. The cost of defending Morotai had already been staggering. 2,847 Japanese casualties, 67 aircraft destroyed, and 23 million yen in military equipment lost, equivalent to $340 million in today's currency. But the real price would be measured not in money or materiel, but in the psychological toll on men like Nakamura, who would carry the war's burden long after the last shot was fired. Private First Class Robert "Bobby" Henderson of the 31st Infantry Division waded through knee-deep surf, his M1 Garand rifle held high above the churning water. The 19-year-old farm boy from Iowa had never seen jungle this dense, a green wall of vegetation so thick that sunlight barely penetrated to the forest floor. The air smelled of rotting vegetation, cordite, and something else he couldn't identify but would later learn was death. "Jesus Christ, it's like a green hell," Henderson muttered to his squad leader, Sergeant Mike O'Brien, as they established a beachhead perimeter. Neither man knew that somewhere in that impenetrable jungle, a Japanese soldier was watching them through binoculars, memorizing their positions and equipment for a report that would never reach its intended recipient. The American invasion of Morotai was proceeding ahead of schedule. General Douglas MacArthur's forces had secured the airfield in 72 hours, established supply depots capable of handling 15,000 tons of materiel daily, and begun construction of bomber bases that would support 234 B-24 Liberators for raids on Japanese positions throughout the Dutch East Indies. But what nobody knew was that the rapid American advance had cut off small pockets of Japanese defenders who would continue fighting a war that had already ended in their commanders' minds. August 15, 1945. Nakamura's hidden camp, interior Morotai. The crackling voice from the portable radio made Nakamura's blood freeze. Emperor Hirohito's surrender broadcast reached his concealed position at 1:47 p.m., but the transmission was fragmentary, broken by atmospheric interference and the dense jungle canopy that blocked radio signals like a natural Faraday cage. Endure the unendurable. Bear the unbearable. The Emperor's words faded in and out, creating a puzzle of incomplete sentences that Nakamura struggled to interpret. His commanding officer's final orders had been explicit. Fight to the death. Never surrender. The Emperor depends on your sacrifice. Nakamura made a decision that would define the next 29 years of his life. Convinced the broadcast was American propaganda designed to demoralize Japanese forces, he switched off the radio and retreated deeper into the jungle. His survival kit contained 47 rounds of ammunition, 3 days of rice rations, a medical kit with basic supplies, and a photograph of his family in Taiwan. Everything he needed to continue a war that had already ended. The psychological impact of isolation began immediately. Without human contact or reliable information, Nakamura's perception of time became distorted. Days blended into weeks, weeks into months, as he maintained military discipline in a world that no longer existed. He built shelters, foraged for food, and conducted reconnaissance patrols against an enemy that had long since departed. Dr. Kenji Matsumoto, a military psychiatrist who would later study Nakamura's case, explained the phenomenon. Extreme isolation combined with unwavering belief in duty created a psychological time capsule. The soldier's mind rejected contradictory information to preserve his sense of purpose and identity. September 3, 1950, Nakamura's territory, 5 years after surrender. The Indonesian independence fighters who occasionally glimpsed a figure moving through the jungle dismissed him as a local hermit, or perhaps a surviving Dutch colonial. Nakamura had learned to avoid human contact entirely, developing survival skills that would have impressed the most experienced jungle warfare instructors. His daily routine was militarily precise: 0500 hours reveille, 0530 equipment inspection, 0600 perimeter patrol, 0800 foraging expedition, 1200 rest period during peak heat, 1400 maintenance tasks, 1800 evening patrol, 2000 hours lights out. This schedule never varied, creating structure in a world that had lost all meaning except for his unwavering loyalty to an emperor who had already renounced war. Nakamura's improvised equipment demonstrated remarkable ingenuity. He had fashioned fishing hooks from uniform buttons, created snares from bootlaces, and built water collection systems using his helmet and strips of canvas. His Type 38 rifle, carefully maintained with improvised cleaning materials, remained functional despite 5 years of tropical humidity and neglect. The physical toll was severe but manageable. Nakamura's weight had dropped from 68 kilograms to approximately 52 kilograms, but his body had adapted to the jungle environment. He had survived malaria, dengue fever, and countless infections using traditional remedies learned from observing local wildlife and plant behavior. What nobody knew was that Indonesian authorities had received 23 separate reports of a ghost soldier in the Morotai interior, but dismissed them as folklore. The idea that a Japanese soldier could survive alone in the jungle for 5 years seemed impossible to officials who had never experienced the psychological power of absolute dedication to duty. The sound of helicopters had become more frequent, but Nakamura interpreted them as evidence of continued military operations. His worldview remained frozen in 1944. Japan was still fighting the Greater East Asia War. American forces occupied strategic positions throughout the Pacific, and his mission remained unchanged: gather intelligence and await orders from his superiors. Nakamura had developed an elaborate intelligence network based on observing aircraft patterns, noting changes in local infrastructure, and tracking what he believed were enemy troop movements. His handwritten reports, carefully preserved in waterproof containers made from salvaged materials, documented 5,147 separate observations over 15 years. The reports revealed a mind struggling to reconcile contradictory evidence with unshakable beliefs. Jet aircraft were classified as new American fighters, helicopters became rotary wing reconnaissance platforms, and Indonesian construction projects were interpreted as enemy fortification efforts. Each observation was meticulously recorded, analyzed, and filed according to military intelligence protocols learned during basic training. Local Indonesian villager Suharto Wijaya occasionally found evidence of the mysterious jungle dweller: carefully constructed shelters, improvised tools, and gardens planted with military precision. "We thought it was a spirit," Wijaya would later recall. "Someone who lived between worlds, neither alive nor dead." The psychological adaptation was extraordinary. Nakamura had created an entire universe where his mission remained relevant and his sacrifice meaningful. Time had become circular rather than linear. Each day was simultaneously December 26, 1944, and whatever date his internal calendar calculated based on sunrise and sunset observations, Indonesian Air Force pilot Captain Norbertus Onabala was conducting a routine survey flight when he spotted something that made him radio immediately to base: geometric patterns in the jungle that could only be man-made. flying his Aero Commander 500 at 3,000 feet, Onibala photographed what appeared to be cultivated gardens, constructed shelters, and cleared pathways arranged with military precision. Base Control, this is Survey 7. I have visual confirmation of organized human activity at coordinates 02D GATS 128D GUNT2E. Recommend immediate ground investigation. Onibala's report triggered a chain of events that would finally end Nakamura's 29-year war. The ground team that reached Nakamura's position on December 18, 1974, found a 52-year-old man who had aged 3 decades in isolation, but maintained the bearing and discipline of an Imperial Japanese soldier. His uniform, patched and repatched countless times, still bore the insignia of his original unit. His rifle was clean, functional, and loaded with ammunition he had carefully rationed for nearly 3 decades. Lieutenant Yuki Akatsu, the Japanese Self-Defense Force officer who made first contact, later described the encounter. He stood at attention, saluted perfectly, and asked for orders. In his mind, he was still reporting for duty after a 29-year reconnaissance mission. The numbers told an incredible story of survival. Nakamura had lived alone for 10,157 days, survived 29 monsoon seasons, and maintained military discipline without human contact for longer than most people's entire careers. He had constructed 47 different shelters, cultivated 12 varieties of edible plants, and created an inventory system that tracked every piece of equipment and supply with obsessive precision. But what nobody knew was that Nakamura's discovery would force a complete re-evaluation of human psychological resilience and the power of unwavering belief to sustain life under impossible circumstances. The medical examination, December 20th, 1974. Dr. Hiroshi Tanaka, the military physician who conducted Nakamura's initial medical evaluation, found a man who defied every assumption about long-term isolation survival. Despite 29 years in the jungle, Nakamura showed no signs of serious mental illness, maintained excellent physical condition for his age, and demonstrated cognitive abilities that remained sharp and focused. His vital signs were remarkable, Dr. Tanaka reported. Blood pressure 120/80, resting heart rate 68 beats per minute, muscle tone consistent with regular physical activity. Most surprisingly, he showed no symptoms of chronic depression or anxiety disorders typically associated with prolonged isolation. The psychological evaluation revealed the extraordinary power of purpose-driven survival. Nakamura had maintained sanity by preserving his identity as a soldier with a mission. Every action, from daily equipment maintenance to seasonal food preservation, was justified by his unwavering belief that he was still serving his emperor and country. His improvised calendar, carved into a wooden board with meticulous precision, was only 34 days off from the actual date, an error rate of less than 0.3% over 29 years. This demonstrated not only remarkable mathematical ability, but also the psychological importance of maintaining temporal structure in an environment where time had no external markers. The debriefing sessions revealed a mind that had created elaborate explanations for every piece of contradictory evidence encountered during his isolation. Jet aircraft were advanced American prototypes, satellite launches were rocket attacks on Japanese positions, and the absence of Japanese reinforcements was explained as strategic withdrawal to more defensible positions. When Nakamura finally emerged from the jungle, he discovered a world transformed beyond recognition. Japan had become an economic superpower with a gross domestic product of $498 billion, larger than the entire wartime economy he remembered. The country that had sent him to war with bolt-action rifles and bamboo spears now manufactured automobiles, electronics, and precision machinery exported worldwide. The psychological shock was profound but manageable, due to his extraordinary mental resilience. Nakamura adapted to modern life with the same methodical approach he had used to survive in the jungle. He learned to use telephones, televisions, and automobiles with the focused attention of a soldier mastering new equipment. His family in Taiwan had mourned him as dead for 29 years. His younger brother had built a successful business, married, and raised children who were now older than Nakamura had been when he disappeared. The reunion was emotional, but complicated by the vast gulf of experience that separated them. The Japanese government awarded Nakamura a pension equivalent to 29 years of back pay, approximately 2.3 million yen, worth $43,000 in today's currency. More importantly, they officially recognized his service and sacrifice, providing the validation that his decades of isolation had not been meaningless. Nakamura's story captured global attention as the ultimate example of duty, survival, and human resilience. Journalists from 23 countries traveled to interview the last Japanese soldier, creating a media circus that overwhelmed the quiet man who had spent 3 decades in solitude. "I was simply doing my duty," Nakamura told reporters through a translator. "A soldier follows orders until relieved by proper authority. I received no such orders." His simple explanation masked the extraordinary psychological strength required to maintain purpose and sanity during nearly 3 decades of complete isolation. The story resonated particularly strongly in Japan, where Nakamura became a symbol of traditional values in a rapidly modernizing society. His unwavering loyalty and self-discipline represented qualities that many Japanese felt were being lost in the pursuit of economic prosperity and Western lifestyle adoption. Book publishers offered substantial contracts for his memoirs, but Nakamura declined most commercial opportunities. He preferred quiet retirement, occasional speaking engagements at military academies, and simple pleasures like regular meals and human conversation that he had been denied for so long. Researchers from multiple disciplines studied Nakamura's case to understand the limits of human psychological and physical endurance. His survival provided unprecedented data about long-term isolation effects, improvised technology development, and the role of belief systems in maintaining mental health under extreme stress. Dr. Margaret Foster, a psychologist from Stanford University who interviewed Nakamura extensively, published groundbreaking research on purpose-driven survival. Her findings suggested that individuals with strong ideological frameworks could maintain psychological stability far longer than previously thought possible. Nakamura's case demonstrates that the human mind can create meaning and structure even in the absence of external validation, Dr. Foster wrote. His unwavering sense of duty provided psychological armor against despair, depression, and mental breakdown that would have destroyed most people within months. Military survival instructors incorporated lessons from Nakamura's experience into training programs worldwide. His techniques for water collection, food preservation, shelter construction, and equipment maintenance became standard curriculum at survival schools from Fort Bragg to the British SAS training facility in Hereford. The medical data was equally valuable. Nakamura's physical condition after 29 years of jungle living provided insights into human adaptation, nutrition requirements, and the long-term effects of isolation on immune system function and cardiovascular health. Nakamura's discovery came at a time when the world was reassessing the human cost of World War II and its lasting psychological effects on survivors. His story provided a unique perspective on the war's impact, not just on those who experienced combat, but on individuals who carried its burden long after the fighting ended. The numbers were staggering when placed in historical context. While Nakamura spent 29 years believing the war continued, Japan had transformed from a devastated nation with 66 million people living in poverty to the world's second-largest economy, with a population of 111 million enjoying unprecedented prosperity. His isolation had lasted longer than the entire duration of the Cold War's most dangerous phase. He had missed the Korean War, the Vietnam War, the Cuban Missile Crisis, the moon landing, and countless other events that defined the post-war world. Yet his dedication to duty remained unshaken by the passage of time or the absence of external validation. The story also highlighted the war's continuing impact on families and communities throughout Asia. Thousands of soldiers remained missing in action, their fates unknown to relatives who maintained hope for decades. Nakamura's survival offered both inspiration and heartbreak, proof that survival was possible, but also evidence of the enormous human cost of prolonged conflict. Nakamura's adjustment to modern life was remarkably successful, considering the magnitude of change he had experienced. He lived quietly in a small apartment provided by the Japanese government, maintained a garden that reflected his jungle survival skills, and occasionally spoke to military audiences about leadership, duty, and perseverance. His daily routine remained military in its precision: early rising, physical exercise, equipment maintenance, and structured activities that provided the framework he had relied upon for survival. The habits developed during 29 years of isolation proved impossible to break, but they also provided stability in a world that often seemed chaotic and overwhelming. Tragically, Nakamura's return to civilization was brief. On January 7, 1979, just 4 years after his rescue, he died of lung cancer at age 56. The disease had likely been developing during his final years in the jungle, but went undiagnosed until too late for effective treatment. His funeral was attended by hundreds of people, including government officials, military officers, and ordinary citizens who had been inspired by his story. The ceremony combined traditional Japanese military honors with Buddhist rituals, reflecting both his service and his peaceful transition from warrior to civilian. Nakamura's story raises profound questions about duty, sacrifice, and the nature of heroism in modern warfare. His 29-year ordeal was simultaneously magnificent and tragic, a testament to human endurance that also highlighted the terrible cost of unwavering loyalty to causes that may no longer exist. Military historians debate whether Nakamura's dedication represented the highest form of military virtue or a cautionary tale about the dangers of absolute obedience. His refusal to accept surrender, even when presented with evidence, demonstrated both admirable commitment and potentially dangerous inflexibility. The psychological implications remain relevant for understanding modern military service, particularly in conflicts where objectives may change rapidly and communication with command structures may be disrupted. Nakamura's experience provides valuable lessons about maintaining purpose and identity under extreme stress while also highlighting the importance of adaptability and critical thinking. His survival techniques continue to influence military training programs worldwide, but his story also serves as a reminder that the human cost of warfare extends far beyond battlefield casualties, to include the psychological burden carried by survivors long after conflicts officially end. The statistics of Nakamura's survival are both impressive and heartbreaking. 10,957 days of isolation, 29 monsoon seasons survived, 47 different shelters constructed, 12 varieties of food cultivated, and countless hours of military discipline maintained without external validation or human contact. Before his rescue, Nakamura believed he was serving his emperor and country in an ongoing war, maintained perfect military bearing and discipline, and preserved detailed intelligence records of enemy activities. After his rescue, he discovered that his war had ended 29 years earlier. His emperor had renounced military conquest, and his country had become a peaceful economic power. The transformation was complete but came at enormous personal cost. 3 decades of life spent in service to a cause that no longer existed, isolation from family and society during the most productive years of his life, and the burden of adjusting to a world that had moved on without him. Teruo Nakamura's story teaches us that human beings are capable of extraordinary endurance when sustained by unshakable purpose and unwavering discipline. It also reminds us that the greatest sacrifices are often made by ordinary people who simply refuse to abandon their duties, regardless of personal cost. One soldier's 29-year war ended not with victory or defeat, but with the quiet dignity of duty fulfilled against impossible odds.